Welcome back to the Coys Diesel Podcast. My name's Chris Cagle. This is our famous host, Coy Redman. We're back with y'all for episode 4. We're coming back with some turbo talk, jumping into another brand, the Ram. Last episode, we covered the Ford, the 6.0 in particular. So if you missed that episode and you're a Ford lover, go back. If not, you want to hear some of the topics that Coy jumped on with the Ford 6.0, please go check it out in December, Coy. We're in December. Christmas is coming around the corner. You know, Coy's going to be over here doing a lot of work, getting a podcast in, so we're lucky for all the time he's gotten. So let's jump in for all the Ram lovers out there, Coy. We're going to be talking about the Ram Turbo, kind of jump into a little bit of just the overall part. But then I think what you're going to do really great today is speak on to an issue that you're seeing and probably help a lot of people out that's probably having that issue. So I will turn the floor over to you and let you kind of introduce everybody to the Ram, the Turbo, and what we're going to be jumping into.
All right, so what we're looking at here on this table is a Ram 2500, 3500 truck. You're going to have a turbocharger that looks like this. This is all the pieces it takes to build it up. This particular turbo is a 13 to 18 year model. Prior years had a similar design. There are little running changes with actuator and things like that. So we'll get started with this part right here in the middle. This is your turbo actuator. So this mounts right here to the outside of the turbocharger in the center housing, bearing housing. And basically what this does is similar like we explained on the 6.0. It's a solenoid that controls the vane operation. The vane operation on these turbochargers is a little different because you don't actually have vanes that are loosely, freely moving. You have a plate in here that does move back and forth, and you do have an arm right here that's controlled by the actuator, and it moves up and down. So when you're stationary in this position here, you're going to get full boost. This turbine's going to be the biggest it's going to be, okay? When you go here, you're going to make it smaller, and you're going to spool up faster, okay? The problems you're seeing, and also this is what controls your exhaust brake. So whenever you hit your exhaust brake button and you let go of your throttle and you hear that the exhaust start backing up, this is what's happening. It's controlled here. It's all done in here. The magic is inside the turbo. So the problems that we see with these turbos is a lot of people think the actuator is the most problematic thing in this situation, and in some cases it is, but in most cases it's not, and I'm going to explain to you why. So this thing is electronic. It takes inputs from intake temp, pressures, throttle, different temperature sensors, also looks at fuel injection data to know how to control the vanes, okay? So what happens is, let's just say you get a code and you think the VGT is bad because that's what it tells you. You think this solenoid is bad, the actuator, okay? But in most cases, it's not the actuator. The actuator looks at amperage, and if the amperage draw is too high, it's going to kick a code in the computer, and it's going to tell you that this actuator is bad. But in most cases, the amp draw is too high because it's stuck. So what do? You bring it to the shop, or you say, I'm just going to change the actuator. You change the actuator, and you get the same code. You think then that you got a bad actuator, but you didn't really get a bad actuator. The whole problem is right here in this side of the turbo, okay? This part right here is called a nozzle, and you have two little arms underneath here that push it up and down. These arms, they get destroyed from carbon buildup, okay? So in my shop, we're not just going to change the actuator. It's not going to happen, because you could have a situation where your actuator shows it's bad, just like I told you, and you thought you got a bad one, all that stuff. You do it again, and then you realize there's something else going on, because you're not going to have two bad actuators back to back.
Right.
Okay? So the next thing you're going to do, you're going to think, well, maybe it's something in the turbo. Well, it is. You definitely got an issue going on in the turbo, and that's why we will not replace just the actuator, because you may put an actuator on there, it might last a week, and you get the code again. Well, guess what? Guess what comes with the turbo when you buy it? An actuator. So we're not going down that road. We're going to replace the whole thing.
And I think that's a lot of people that are watching, like when it comes to why would I bring my truck to you? What is that training that you give your technicians, whether they have the most experience in the world or the least experience, and you're getting your hands on, everybody that's coming in and working on the trucks? What do you tell the technicians, what's your step-by-step process? Is there a specific, step-by-step that, hey, if this comes in, they're talking about a turbo problem in a Ram, I want you to do this?
Right, so basically what would you do to verify if it was the actuator or the turbo? If you come in the shop and you're not sure, you would take the actuator off of the turbo while it's still on the truck, and you would take this arm right here and you would see if it would have the full movement. And by full movement, you see that line right there and this line right here, it has to make that full movement. And it shouldn't take more than what I'm doing right here. If you have to force it to move back and forth, you've got an internal issue with your turbo and you're going to need a full replacement. It should be just that easy to move back and forth. If you cannot do that, you're going to need a turbocharger. And then when you get the turbocharger, it's going to come with a new actuator.
And that comes with bringing your truck with somebody that has the experience like Coy. I guess, while we're kind of touching on this topic, what are some of the things that if they're not a diesel technician, if they're not certified, what are some of the things that if you bring it to the wrong guy, you bring it to the wrong shop, that, they can be looking at? What are some of the mistakes that a bad technician can make and tell you?
Well, the thing is, like I said, they'll start by changing the actuator because they get the actuator code. Instead of trying to take the actuator off and actually diagnose the issue, they're just going straight into, hey, the actuator's bad because that's what the computer told me.
Right.
And that's the big misconception with diagnosis. People bring it in all the time, and they don't want to actually give us the time to. A lot of people, let me rephrase that. They don't understand the time it takes to properly diagnose it, because that's the biggest part. If I change this part on your truck and it don't fix it, and then we got to change all these other parts, there's going to be problems. We're going to have problems, you know what I mean? So we're trying to alleviate those problems, take the time to diagnose it correctly, because if you just change the part that the computer tells you is bad, most of the time it's not going to fix it. There's other reasons. There's a cause and an effect, so you got to make sure you diagnose it properly to make sure you're not wasting your money, because once you put this electronic part on that turbo, it's yours, brother.
Yeah.
Ain't no parts house taking it back, no installed electronic part. And these things aren't cheap. If you buy a genuine one, you're going to spend the money.
No, hey, look, that's why this podcast is more informational. But when you've got Coy Redmond and Coys Diesel hosting it, and you're in this area and you're not bringing your truck to Coy, these are some of the things that I want you to hear. This is the patience, the attention to detail. The thing, if you go somewhere else and you get it wrong, you're probably using that truck to make money. All right? We don't want you to have to waste the money that you don't need to. So bring it to an expert. Bring it to somebody that knows how to take the patience to really dive into the details, explain to you the problem, and then fix it right the first time.
That's right.
And that's our goal. That's our main goal there. So appreciate you jumping in on that part. Right now, there's a lot of things going on that we're seeing in the shop with the Ram, and that's being a consistent problem. I know you've talked about it a lot. Your shop technicians, your diesel technicians have talked about it a lot. Let's dive into that issue that you're seeing pretty consistently here in this area, and give everybody kind of an idea of what's going on right now.
Talking about the turbo in general? Yeah.
Yeah, that issue that we're seeing that's coming in on the shop.
Yep. So basically, there's another issue that you have as well. So high EGTs, when this housing gets very hot, this ring right here will swell, and then it'll seize or crack. And then what that does in turn, when this nozzle comes through, to get through, is that where it sits, movement, it's going to lock this up. So if you got a truck, a Ram, that sounds like it's a jet engine at idle, and it has no power and it's blowing black smoke and soot out the tailpipe and doesn't want to idle, this is your problem. You've got a stuck turbo, or you've got a cracked ring from excessive heat, load, all of the above. So there's not much you can do about that. It's just something that happens with these trucks. Obviously, using your exhaust brake and moving this stuff and keeping it moving and cycling and driving the truck helps a lot. Another thing we see too is lack of maintenance. Okay, let me show you something. So this right here, this isn't out of a Cummins. This is out of a Duramax. I just happened to have it handy, so I figured I would share today. So when this happens, you could potentially damage your turbo or ruin your engine, because this was nearly about to suck into the turbo and destroy the whole engine, because once the metal gets in there, it's going to destroy everything. But what also happens is, what people don't realize, when you pull it off and you see a bunch of oil in this housing here, besides the crankcase, sometimes from lack of maintenance, air filters, and things of that nature, you'll see oil in here, and that's from the bearing housing. It's forcing the oil out of the center housing because of the lack of maintenance. So the cheapest thing, as I've said many times and every time, is maintenance is cheap. Change your air filter, and don't go buy some O'Reilly stuff or anything like that, or cheap brands, I should say, because the pleats are not the same. They don't flow the same. Just go buy a factory filter. If you don't want a factory filter, we recommend S&B filters. S&B has got a great lineup for dry and oil filters that flow great, because this is not what you want to end up with at all.
And that routine maintenance, again, just for anybody that just heard that, is it based off of mileage, based off of, what's that based off of?
Well, air filter is not going to be based off mileage. Air filter you need to check, it depends on what you're doing. If you're in harsh climates and you're in dirt and dust every day, if you're doing construction, you're probably going to need an air filter every 5 to 6 months, maybe less. You just need to check it. There's a lot of trucks have a monitor that will show you. I can grab one for you. Let me show you. So most trucks have something like this, okay? And you see how you got the green mark and you got the red mark? Whenever this thing pulls over to the red mark, that means you got a restriction. That means your filter probably is starting to look bad. So you need to replace it, because you're not getting airflow to your engine. I can't tell you how many trucks come in here just for a bad air filter. Right. They'll come in and say, look, I'm losing power, I'm blowing smoke, because obviously when you don't have air, you have too much fuel, it's going to smoke. Even if the emissions are on it or whatever, it's going to smoke because you're getting too much fuel because you're not getting any air.
In the air, yep.
Yeah, so I can tell you how many we charge an hour diag to come back here and spend the time and then pull the air filter out during our multi-point when we're checking everything, and this is what it looks like. And then there's their problem.
Right.
And most of them get lucky. They don't have a serious failure. But if he would have continued to drive much further, if that thing would have sucked into the intake, he'd have needed an engine. An engine for the truck that this came out of, just the engine is $15,000 from the dealership.
Right.
That's no labor, extra parts, nothing. So you just cost yourself almost $20,000 for a $40, $50 filter. So it just doesn't make sense, So you just have to maintain the trucks, and that's the biggest thing. Even when I talk to the guy that rebuilds these for us out in Houston, he said the biggest thing we see is maintenance. People not taking care of their trucks, and it leads to failures. Now, obviously, what we talked about the nozzle and the plate and all this, that's from carbon buildup. It's going to be very hard to fix that problem. Excessive carbon buildup also could be from wore out injectors. Excessive amounts of fuel is going to create more carbon. So there's other things. So clean fuel filters, all that adds up to all this working properly.
Absolutely. Well, that's going to be what we reiterate all the time, is just making sure that you have somebody that you trust, that you can bring your truck to. If you're not in this area, obviously you might have a guy around you, but just make sure you have that consistent communication and at least the wherewithal of when you need to get your truck in and maintain. So, that Ram turbo, I think you touched on everything. Is there anything else that we need to kind of touch on that Ram?
The only thing I didn't touch on that doesn't affect the drivability or anything is the difference. Something they incorporated on these, which they're incorporating in a lot of new trucks, is these turbos actually have coolant running through them as well. And what the coolant does, it just helps keeps the bearings and the actuator cool so it doesn't get overheated. It just helps with the extended life of the turbocharger itself. So that's about the only thing I didn't touch on. Just the extra cooling point for the turbo just to extend that life. So the manufacturers are trying to make these things last longer, but they're also having to accommodate the emissions and make everything work together. So
love it. Look, and that was all we really wanted to touch base on, is quick topics that you can listen to, watch, and not get bored of hearing. Not going to go over long, not going to go a long podcast. So again, Coys Diesel is here in Gonzales, Louisiana. If you're in this area within 60 miles, make Coy your guy. Make sure your truck's being taken care of the right way, because he's doing it the right way. So we appreciate everybody watching us. CoysDiesel.com. You can find him on Facebook. You can talk to Coy. When you're going to call here, you're going to message here, Coy's going to be the one that talks right back to you, right?
Yeah, in most cases. Sometimes I'm even answering the phone whenever the service riders are one's out or one's at lunch or one. Sometimes I'm answering the phone, man. I'm here, dude. Some people think I don't work here. I do every day.
I do. I believe it. I see it every day too. So we appreciate y'all watching. That was episode 4. Tune back in for episode 5. We'll see y'all next time.
Thanks, guys.